Today, we're tackling one of the most powerful and, honestly, one of the most misunderstood ideas in all of modern biology. It's an idea that completely reframed how we see life, evolution, and even our own actions. This is the story of the selfish gene.
All right, let's just jump right in with a big question that basically split the world of biology for decades. When you look at the grand drama of evolution, who is the real star of the show? Is it the creature we can see, the lion, the bird, you and me? Or is it the invisible, immortal code that it carries inside? The gene.
Answering that one question sparked a huge intellectual war between two absolute giants of science in the 20th century, Richard Dawkins and Stephen Jay Gould. And this wasn't some quiet disagreement in a dusty library. No, this was a public, passionate, and sometimes pretty fierce battle over the very soul of evolution.
So here's the core of it. On one side, you've got Richard Dawkins. He argued that evolution is at its heart a competition between genes. Organisms, yep, that includes us, are basically just temporary vehicles that genes build to survive and make copies. But on the other side, you had Stephen Jay Gould, who said not so fast. He saw the organism as the main player. For him, evolution was a story of whole creatures competing, where things like pure chance and massive environmental changes played a huge role.
Now, before Dawkins came along, a lot of people just sort of assumed something called group selection was true. It's the idea that animals do things for the good of the species. It sounds really nice, right? But it has a major flaw. Think about it. In a group of totally selfless individuals, a single selfish one would have a huge advantage. It would thrive, pass on its selfish traits, and pretty soon the whole group wouldn't be so selfless anymore.
So to solve this puzzle, Dawkins proposed something totally revolutionary. He said, let's stop looking at evolution from our perspective, from the level of the animal. Instead, let's try to see it from the point of view of the gene itself. And when you do that, well, the world looks completely different.
Okay, so the first key idea you need to get is the replicator. For Dawkins, the replicator is the gene. It's the real star of the show, because it's the only thing that's potentially immortal. I mean, our bodies grow old and die, but our genes can be passed down for thousands, even millions of generations, just making copies of themselves. They are the true survivors.
So, if the gene is the immortal replicator, what are we?
Well, we are the survival machine. That's his term for every living thing, from a blade of grass to a blue whale to you. We're just temporary vehicles, incredibly complex machines built by a huge colony of genes. And from their perspective, our purpose is really simple: keep them safe and help them make more copies.
And Dawkins really didn't pull any punches with his imagery. He described genes as replicators, swarming in huge colonies, safe inside gigantic lumbering robots, manipulating them by remote control. Wow. I mean, it's such a stark and powerful way to think about the relationship between our genes and our bodies.
But wait a minute, this whole selfish view immediately hits a snag, right? If the main driver of everything is selfish genes just looking out for number one, then why do we see so much cooperation and self-sacrifice in nature? What about altruism? This is the big puzzle. I mean, think of a worker bee dying for its hive, or a mother animal risking everything for her young. The natural world is absolutely full of acts that seem completely selfless. How on earth can a theory that's built on selfishness possibly explain that? Just look at this bird, for example. It's doing something called a distraction display, basically faking a broken wing to lure a fox or some other predator away from its nest. It is putting itself in extreme danger to save its babies. On the surface, that looks like the exact opposite of selfish behavior.
But the gene's eye view has this really elegant solution. It's called kin selection. See, that bird is risking its life for its chicks because those chicks are carrying copies of its genes. So an act that looks like individual altruism is actually a form of genetic selfishness. A gene that programs you to help your close relatives is really just helping copies of itself that happen to be in other bodies.
And you can actually break this down with some simple math. Let's say you find 8 pieces of fruit. If you keep 3 for yourself, your genes get a certain payoff. We'll call it 18 points. But what if you share? Because your brother and your cousin share a percentage of your genes, giving them the fruit actually results in a higher total genetic payoff, 19.5 points. So from a gene's perspective, sharing can actually be the most selfish thing to do.
But Dawkins' gene-centered view was definitely not the only game in town. His great rival, Stephen Jay Gould, argued that by focusing so tightly on genes, Dawkins was missing the bigger, messier, and much more unpredictable story that the fossil record was telling us.
So Gould's big idea was called punctuated equilibrium. He looked at all these fossils and said, hey, evolution isn't this slow, steady, gradual march forward. Instead, he saw long periods where not much changes at all. He called that stasis. And then they're suddenly punctuated by these rapid bursts of change. For Gould, this showed that evolution wasn't just a gene-by-gene race. It was shaped by massive events, environmental catastrophes, and just pure random luck.
And in the end, their conflict was about more than just biology. It was really a clash between two fundamentally different ways of looking at science itself and its proper place in our world.
This quote really captures the heart of it. For Dawkins, science isn't just a light in the dark, it is by far our best and perhaps our only light. But for Gould, science was just one way of knowing. A super powerful tool for understanding the material world, sure, but it shouldn't cross over into the realms of art, morality, and religion, which he saw as separate, equally important ways of understanding the human experience.
But let's get back to the selfish gene, because the final conclusion of the theory is maybe its most provocative and powerful part, especially for us, the only creatures on this planet who can actually stop and think about all this. So, if we are just survival machines that are programmed by our genes with one basic instruction, do whatever it takes to make copies of us, what does that mean for things like consciousness and free will? Does the fact that we can think and plan and see the future mean that the tyranny of the gene is finally over? And this is the amazing optimistic twist at the very end of the book. Dawkins says, look, we're born selfish. But then he says, let us understand what our own selfish genes are up to, because we may then at least have the chance to upset their designs. We are the only species on Earth that can become aware of our own biological programming and then choose to do something completely different. Which leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? The gene's eye view shows us the invisible strings that have been pulling life along for billions of years. But it also reveals that we, uniquely, are able to see those strings. So are we destined to be puppets of our DNA forever? Or can our consciousness, our culture, and our choices give us the power to truly cut them?